Hello, you're watching Eastern Europe Review, the program that is mainly about Belarus, Ukraine and Russia. This is the common project of Belsat TV and TVP World. My name is Dmitry Mitskevich, and let's take a look at what we've got for you today. Circumventing loopholes in the enforcement of European sanctions, activists have blocked the transport of Belarusian fertilizers at the Lithuanian border.
We were given a signal that sanctioned carbamide is going to be transported across the border to the European Union.
Machine guns and military drills. How are Russian children taught to love their motherland?
I'm ready to protect and love my homeland. And die for it? Yes, and die for it.
No home, no food. Stories of women victims of Russian aggression.
My husband's acquaintances helped to bury him. I should have done it myself, but I didn't go, because in my situation, I simply couldn't handle it.
Activists and journalists continue to expose the schemes of evading European sanctions by Belarusian companies. This time, the activists blocked the road to 2 trucks with goods at the border. They were carrying fertilizer from the Hrodna Azot plant, which has been under sanctions since 2021. Apparently, the Lukashenko regime has found ways to continue selling fertilizers to Western Europe and even makes a lot of money on it. It is essential to draw the attention of Western countries to such violations and make them start an investigation.
This is the Raigardas checkpoint in Lithuania. A truck with cargo arrived here from Prievalki checkpoint on the Belarusian side and passed customs control. It reached Lithuania from Hrodna.
Загрузка на Гродный Азот была, да? Да, на Гродный Азот загрузка. Ага. Хорошо. Просто почему спрашиваем, Гродный Азот же под санкциями, нет? Под санкции, по идее, нельзя везти грузы в Евросоюз с Гродного Азота.
Просто я не знаю.
Ага.
Я не знаю.
А как?
Я не скажу, давай на фирму. Как называется фирма, я просто там буду.
In the video, the driver told Stanislav Ivashkevich, the head of Belarusian Investigative Center, about his modest role, showed the documents and confirmed several times that he really loaded the cargo at the premises of the Hrodna Azot. The plant is a major supplier of fertilizers to European countries. In 2021, it fell under the 5th package of European Union sanctions. The United States also renewed its sanctions against the company. But this didn't stop the sale of products on these territories.
Они делают удобрения из природного газа.
The plant makes fertilizers from natural gas. The business is based on the fact that Putin gave Lukashenko very cheap gas in exchange for his help in attacking Ukraine. Lukashenko is now making a lot of money by selling these fertilizers primarily to Europe. Europe is a very large buyer of nitrogen fertilizers.
When the European Union introduced sanctions against the Hrodna Azot, the company delivery terms have predictably become more demanding and the geography of customers narrowed, but perhaps not as much as it should have under the circumstances. The activists of the Rabochi Ruch initiative, which unites the working people of Belarus, began to investigate the schemes of evading sanctions by trucks. In order to stop one of such transports, as it turned out later to Serbia, the activists spent 2 days at the border following the advice of their hidden sources in Hrodna Azot.
We were given a signal that sanctioned carbamide is going to be transported across the border to the European Union. They told us when the loading would approximately take place and when the cars should be at the border checkpoint.
In order to prevent carbamide from reaching Europe, the activists had to discuss it first with the police.
Then the Lithuanian border guards came, the customs service came, and the things moved on. We showed them all the facts regarding the violations.
1 truck and soon after the 2nd truck were turned back for re-inspection. Belsat received an official comment from the Customs Department of the Ministry of Finance of Lithuania. According to the accompanying documents, the goods weren't included in the sanctions lists, so the trucks were allowed to enter the territory of Lithuania. But things changed after the conversation with the Belarusian activists.
Customs officers turned back 2 trucks for additional inspection. Currently, the circumstances of the incident are being clarified, and the Lithuanian customs has started a pre-trial investigation into the fact of a possible violation of international sanctions.
The investigation of the incident is going to take some time. Activists and journalists have promised that there will be more and more such investigations. The Belarusian Investigative Center is currently investigating the schemes of violation of the sanctions by Hrodna Azot using rail transport. Coincidentally or not, the Prosecutor General of Belarus has just proposed to recognize the Belarusian Investigative Center as an extremist organization.
The Russian government is reintroducing lessons of basic military training to schools. At the same time, dozens of military patriotic education centers where children and teenagers can improve their military skills have been operating in different regions of the country for a long time. Teenagers disassemble and assemble Kalashnikov rifles and meet with participants of the Russian war against Ukraine, while the youngest children are manufacturing trench candles for Wagner mercenaries.
Khabarovsk is the largest city in the Russian Far East. The average flight from Moscow takes about 8 hours. The region is near the country's border with China. However, despite the impressive distance to the capital, the city authorities are trying to follow all the latest trends that are popular across Russia. This also applies to military propaganda among school children. So the main activities in the Khabarovsk Center of Patriotic Education Rise are the races in assembling and disassembling assault rifles. Military drills are in second place in terms of the importance of educating young citizens to love their motherland. This is how teachers understand their task. Their work is not in vain. For example, an 11-year-old schoolboy Igor is already able to clearly say why he needs such skills.
So that I can be prepared and able to defend my homeland.
If working with applied skills is easy, then ideological propaganda has not been established so well yet. Children cannot accurately answer the question who the enemy of their country is and why Russia needs to be defended with arms in hands. The head of Rise Education Center believes that trainers are not doing enough. He worries that many teenagers come to his classes just because the Russian government has promised benefits for university admission for those attending military patriotic centers.
If you talk to them objectively about the political situation in the world, then certain difficulties arise. They are not particularly interested. Apparently, they have other priorities, other bright pictures on the internet that distract their attention.
Russians who have fought against Ukraine come to classes in schools. They are used in order to influence teenagers in a more vivid way. They convey the ideas of war that were generated in the head of Vladimir Putin as well. The lessons are attended by personnel and mercenaries of private military companies. The latter have officially been banned in Russia, but the hirelings conduct the so-called lessons of patriotism wearing ceremonial uniforms with medals.
Since 2014, bullying and mockery have been there in Ukraine. They have eradicated our Russian population.
The representative of the local military registration and enlistment office talks about the advantages of studying at the country's military schools. Free education, uniforms, and food are provided by the state, and after graduating, it is possible to earn good money. By Russian standards, the military who are sent to Ukraine really receive a lot of money. If they die, soldiers' families receive tens of thousands of dollars in compensation. In the meantime, students practice how to properly splint severed or shot limbs. They also study the tactics of conducting modern shooting combat. At the weekends, children are taken to out-of-town training camps where they're trained by retired military men.
Patriotism is the willingness to go to defend one's homeland at any moment. This is true love for it. I'm ready to protect and love my homeland. And die for it? Yes, and die for it.
However, those Russians for whom war and the army are the main sources of income, even their lifestyle, are convinced that there are not enough patriotic activities in Russia now. They are trying to ensure that military training is carried out on a regular and mandatory basis at schools in the same way as languages and science are taught.
We need to expand, namely to add more hours per year for military training, first aid and especially practical first aid.
In the meantime, even the youngest children who still cannot hold assault rifles in their hands are being instilled with a cult of war. In schools and kindergartens, they make so-called trench candles. High school students from the so-called youth army help elementary school children to make this kind of weapon in their extra classes and explain that this is how children help defeat the Nazis. This is the Urals, the city of Magnitogorsk. We can see children attending a competition organized in one of the pools of the city. They are wearing bathing caps, camouflage uniforms, and have machine guns on their backs. This is what a patriotic swim for school children looks like. According to the regional branch of the paramilitary movement Youth Army, this is the way to instill love for the motherland in teenagers. Young people are prepared in advance for the hardships of military service, because during the war everything is possible. The organizers claim that all participants are delighted with such competitions.
About 7 million Ukrainians have left their homes or what have been left of them as a result of hostilities. Among those who flee from death and missiles are pregnant women and families with little children. For internally displaced persons from Bakhmut, Vuhledar, Avdiivka and other cities of the Donetsk region, the local authorities of Zhytomyr have provided accommodation at shelters and hostels.
Anna left her home near the front about 2 weeks ago. Since the beginning of the full-scale war, for 11 months she lived in the basement with her husband, daughter and neighbours. The woman decided to evacuate after her husband was killed at the end of January.
He went to get some water for one woman. She asked to get to canisters. Then the shelling began from all sides. He could not escape anywhere. He died on the spot.
The woman says that due to constant shelling, the body of her husband was lying for several days near the well where he had been drawing water.
My husband's acquaintances helped to bury him. I should have done it myself, but I didn't go, because in my situation, I simply couldn't handle it.
Anna is now 7 months pregnant. She didn't evacuate earlier because of her husband, who didn't want to leave. She has nowhere to return as her home has been destroyed. Until the end of the month, Anna and her daughter are going to live in a shelter. Social workers and psychologists are working with people like Anna who are here and are helping them to adapt to a new life.
We are here to help people to find resources to live, to restore their self-sufficiency, self-regulation, and to adapt to the new environment. This type of work is the most necessary.
Natalia's family is also here in this very shelter. The woman, along with her son Yegor and her husband. When they moved from Solidar to flee the war, temporarily, they were given 2 rooms.
Do you remember when we were walking home and something seemed to explode nearby and we immediately went to the basement?
Yes, the blasts were everywhere. It was in April and it was still far away, but we could hear it very well.
Natalia shows what her house looks like now.
Here is a screenshot. This is what our house looks like now, all that has been left.
Despite the fact that the Russian military has practically stopped shelling Zhytomyr now, Yegor is afraid of loud noises and air raids.
Although we left when it was all far away, we could hear it very well. And now the sound of a siren. The child is afraid of it. He says, let's go straight into the corridor.
Half a year ago, Lyudmila came from Solidar to her granddaughter Natalia and great-grandson Yegor. She stayed in the city for a long time after her relatives had left. The woman still cannot hold back her tears when she recalls what she had to endure.
Somehow they bombed on the day of the Russian air fleet. They started in the morning and finished at 9 p.m. They didn't stop even for a minute. I can't handle it. It's all still in front of my eyes. Even the children are angry that I cry. As soon as I recall it, I cry.
Lyudmila says that there are no people in Solidar now. and the city has been completely destroyed.
Where should we return? I'm afraid to die in a foreign land. My whole family is there. What am I supposed to do now? My home is where I was born, where I lived, where all the children were near me.
The Ministry for Reintegration of Ukraine calculated that up to 5 million internally displaced people were registered in 2022, but the real number is almost 7 million. Most of these people are unable to return home, so now they are trying to set up a new life.
That's all for today. Eastern Europe Review will be back next Sunday. Please stay with TVP World and support Ukraine.